Welcome to the first edition, the first solo edition of the ReSee Movies What to Watch podcast. I thought maybe I would try out doing a solo episode to just drop in and give you all some updates on the company and what's going on and what's new in the world of ReSee. Maybe try to dial back a little bit of the content creation that we've been doing because, to be honest, they're kind of killing me a little bit. Those of you who know me well know that I am really not a huge fan of social media. I actually had just successfully deleted all social media for the first time right before I decided I wanted to start ReSee, and then I had to download social media again and spend half my day on it trying to research and figure out how to build this company. So the irony, I am not a content creator. It sounds like such simple advice, but I've kind of just been thinking about our content and my ability to produce it and how it kind of takes a lot of energy out of me to produce it. And when it comes to content creators, you can kind of tell who really loves what they're doing and who's just doing it to please the algorithm. And I think it was pretty obvious that I didn't love the content that I was creating. That kind of just made me sit back and reflect. And, way back when someone gave me some advice that just seemed very cliche at the time, but now I like slap my forehead and be like, wow, okay, that actually is the best advice for a reason. And that's to kind of lean into doing what you love and lean into what you're good at. I know that seems really obvious, but when you're an entrepreneur, there's like a tendency to try and do all the things you're supposed to do, follow the book, put the effort into these best practices. And some of those are just not catering to my strengths. And while I can't completely ignore them, I still need to build this business. I am going to try to get back to my center a little bit and just focus on the things that I think I'm good at. Conveniently, I think one of the things that I'm good at is talking to people in our community and interacting with you all. And so I have been really meaning to make the podcast more consistent moving forward. And I just thought maybe there's a way for me to do the podcast and yet use the podcast to create some content as needed. And so kind of move away from just focusing on volume, even though I know that that's what the algorithm likes. It needs volume. You need to feed it. It needs to be snappy. It needs to be fast. You need to talk like you're on speed, just to please the algorithm. But I just can't do it without it kind of breaking me a little bit. So I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to do more podcast episodes. I'm going to give you updates about the company via the podcast, and then hopefully really get a chance to connect with you all in a meaningful way offline at ReSee events. Let me know what you think of the format. We would love to hear from you. I really want this to be kind of, based on what you all tell me works and what doesn't work. So the community is still the size where your feedback matters a lot. So please get in touch with me and let me know what you think of the solo edition of the ReSee Movies What to Watch podcast. I guess I'll start with the updates on the company side. And to be completely honest, as if you couldn't tell by the fact that I was reflecting on my social media presence and everything, I kind of have been lacking in inspiration lately. I've been low on energy. It could very much be because of the change of seasons, and daylight savings is always like a wallop here in Berlin. I would say we've been not exactly in a lull as far as our events and our community building goes. We still are having awesome events, and we're still getting a lot of feedback from our guests. To be completely honest, there haven't been as many repeat guests as I would have liked. Like, people are coming, they're saying it's awesome. They're saying it's one of the coolest movie events that they've been to in a while. They're saying that they're going to tell all their friends about it. And then they never come back and they never tell anyone about it. Or at least they don't come up to us and tell us that, someone sent them here. We'll take it with a grain of salt and be like, okay, maybe it's a small sample size. Maybe they haven't had a chance to come back yet. I know everybody's busy. It just makes me think, am I going about the community building in the right way? Is there something else that I could be doing? Yeah, I've just been kind of like reflecting on that. And simultaneously, as many of you may know, I also went back to full-time work and kind of moonlighting on ReSee on nights and weekends. That is probably part of the reason why I'm low on energy as well. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that I'm working like 80 hours a week while I try to regain my work-life balance during this transitional phase. I just figured I would be sort of transparent with you all about the fact that it's not been sort of the hottest streak that ReSee's on. And that doesn't say anything about the events that we have been doing, because the events have been really cool. We just did a awesome Cinesonic event, which is our series that combines movies with live music experiences and performances, featuring a film concert from an artist named Telesonic 9000 that combines a film edited out of royalty-free footage in the public domain and a audio track that's mixed by the performer, and then a live drum performance accompanying the film. It was super cool. It was one of the coolest events that we've done for ReSee thus far, and for sure that was very inspiring. We did an awesome Films for Foodies featuring a screening of Tampopo, a Japanese film that's all about ramen, as part of our Films for Foodies series, with an awesome ramen dinner. Shout out to Fukugawa Ramen in Prenzlauberg. It was really cool. We did another Real Love event last month as well, with something that I'll talk a little bit more about later, but featuring A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. The events have been going on, and the feedback from the events has been positive, so we're going to keep having events and keep using those as an opportunity to build our community. It's been both exciting and exhausting for me personally, so just keeping it real. I wanted to tell you all a little story because it's kind of crazy how the universe works. Right when you're at a point where you're feeling low and you're doubting your own ability to make your dreams come true, and you're questioning all the mistakes or decisions that you made, sometimes the universe just like gives you a sign to keep going. And that actually happened to me today. It's how the späti guy basically saved this podcast episode. I have been trying to level up our production quality here. I got a new phone, new microphone. I ordered ahead of this episode a cool tripod with an LED light on it. For whatever reason, this package was like taking forever to come, and I had scheduled today for our next podcast recording session here in this beautiful studio. I finally get a notice on Saturday. I was out, but I got a notice that the packages were attempted to be delivered and that they were waiting for me at the package shop. And it's weird. I ordered 2 packages. And of course, DHL sends one to one place and another one to another place. And so I've got to go on like a little bit of a scavenger hunt. I go to the first one, which is at a späti, and I talk to the guy. He's super nice. I give him the number and my ID, and he's like, yeah, no, I don't have that package. Like, it's not here. I'm like, that's strange. He like brings me in the back room. We're like checking for the packages for a while. I'm showing him that it says it was delivered. He's like, I don't know what's going on. Like, we don't have it. And they're like, yeah, maybe check back later today. He's going to ask the driver when the driver comes in and see what's the deal with this package. So super frustrating. I'm like, all right, whatever. I go to the other package shop. This one was actually at the post office, or so I thought. And I go with that number and I go to the desk, and they're like, yeah, no, we don't get packages here. Like, why does it say that it's coming here? Like, we no longer accept packages. Like, I'll check in the back, but we don't accept packages. So they go in the back and they check, and there's no package for me. So I'm like, I'm getting scammed here. I got 2 packages. Both of them say they were delivered and neither of them is there. Let me go back and check in the afternoon. I work for a few more hours. I go back to the first späti. And now the older guy who is working there is gone, but his son is there. And I told him, like, yeah, my name is blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yeah, my dad told me about you. We talked to the driver. Man, we don't know. It says it was delivered to your neighbor. I don't know why it's showing here. And we pulled up the DHL website again. It says delivered to your neighbor at the späti. I'm like, okay, you guys aren't my neighbors. Like, what the hell is going on here? They're super confused. They're like, I swear we don't have your package. We have been in business here for 5 years. As you can see, we have like a full organization system. It was very organized. And they were like, in 5 years, we have never lost anyone's package. So we don't know what's going on. Kind of was like, all right, I'm just going to go home. It's a little unfortunate because I was going to use that ring light to film some content tonight. So I'm back at my desk and I'm finishing up my day job work, and my doorbell rings. And I'm thinking like, oh, maybe this is DHL with the package. Well, it was the package, but it was not DHL. It was the guy from the späti who remembered that I needed the tripod and the LED light to film content tonight because we had just talked about it. And so when he found the package, he ran over to my apartment. He obviously had my name and my address. He actually tried to find me on Instagram and send me a message on Instagram first being like, bro, we found your package. He explained what happened. The driver said it was delivered, but it was left in the truck, and then he took it back, and then it was like a mix-up, but then he called the driver and found out that the driver still had it in the truck. The driver brought it to him. He ran it over to me. He like shows up at my door. He's out of breath. He's got a big smile on his face, but he's totally out of breath. I don't know if he closed the späti or he just left it unattended or if someone else was taking care of it, but he came over and he hand delivered me the package because he knew that I needed to record content tonight. When something like that happens, when you're feeling a little down and a little dejected, it's just like an instant boost and maybe a sign from the universe that what I'm doing is not a complete mistake and put a lot of wind in my sails again, let's say. And I'm very thankful to the späti owners at Weichselstrasse 23 in Friedrichshain. That was a really cool little adventure that I went on today. And this podcast, that's kind of like going above and beyond in a way that you just don't get from customer service here in Berlin. Like my American audiences are probably like, oh yeah, tons of companies would hand deliver you the package. What are you talking about? I'm like, no, not in Berlin. The service wasteland, you do not get your packages hand delivered by the späti guy. But this was a special case. So thank you for giving me the inspiration and the energy to be in a better mood while recording this podcast. Anyway, let's get into the real company updates. As you know, we are really going hot with our events. We've got 3 event series, 3 communities that are going really strong and are having events approximately once per month. The Real Love community, formerly known as Dystopian Dating community, that is still going strong at the Filmrauschpalast, having an event approximately once per month. We're trying to kind of figure out what to do with the format for those events right now. We've always been proud of the fact that our events kind of are inclusive in the sense that they are equally social and kind of intimate and understated, and that it's totally normal for you to come and not interact with a bunch of people. It's also obviously very welcome for you to come and interact and socialize with other people, and we would love for our events to be where connections are made of all kinds, romantic and otherwise. But for whatever reason, the Real Love community has been very introverted, I would say, and just kind of more in it to come to a space and reflect on things and less meet someone. What we wanted Real Love to be is kind of ongoing commentary, ongoing dialogue about the state of modern relationships. And that applies to everyone, whether you're in a relationship or not. So we hope that we're able to curate programming for Real Love that someone would get something from, regardless of whether they're in, on a first date or if they're married for decades. As movies are a great way to explore relationships and to, give you conversation starters to discuss with your partner and everything. I haven't quite figured out how social to make it. I typically go into the events with like 2 or 3 different activities planned, actually. Like I don't know which one is going to be the programming for the night. And before the movie, I try to gauge the vibe from the audience and also see how many people show up. And if there's a lot of people, then we have to kind of remix the activity to accommodate. It's been a little tricky to figure out exactly how to approach programming for Real Love. And at the last Real Love event, we did something that I was kind of personally very proud of. And I think it could actually be kind of a cool format going forward. And it was to essentially collect a bunch of information before the event about the theme for the evening, and then discuss the theme on the night of with the guests who show up, and then take the feedback from the guests who show up in person and bring it back online so that it kind of closes the loop and it gives our global community members a chance to be part of the programming, regardless of whether they're in Berlin or not. We wanted to figure out a way to connect you all to the Real Love community without necessarily having to be there, and hope that you still choose to show up from time to time. And I thought maybe I could also use this podcast as an opportunity to close the loop on the Real Love event that we just did, and also get your feedback on whether you like this format for future events. So at the last Real Love event, which was just before Halloween, we watched A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, a Persian American black and white feminist vampire thriller, romance, coming of age story, all of those things. It's a great movie. I highly recommend it to everyone. It doesn't matter that spooky season is over. It revolves around the protagonist, who is a young woman, a young female vampire in a fictional city in Iran, who is kind of in her angsty teenage or adolescent years, and she goes around the city preying on men who prey on women. A lot of patriarchal themes in traditional vampire stories that just get flipped on their head in this movie. And I really love it. I really think it's a great movie. It's such a good vibes movie. If you're the kind of person who likes movies that are like vibesy and atmospheric and feel like music videos a little bit, then you would definitely like it. Unfortunately, the turnout wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. We probably had about 15 or 20 people there, but it's by far not one of our best turnouts. And another reason why I'm thinking about kind of like engaging with you all online for these activities is because, damn it, like I worked hard on that shit for only 15 or 20 people to show up. So I kind of want to talk about it more. So the theme for the evening was draining the blood from the patriarchy, just kind of taking that theme of flipping vampire tropes on their head and what would it be like if there were a matriarchy. And also, on a more realistic note, how do we sort of unravel some of the things that happen in a patriarchal society that make women feel uncomfortable, make women feel unsafe, and which ultimately probably have a negative impact on dating and relationships? And so what I did, and some of you may already participated, so thank you if you did, is I created a survey and I put it out before the movie and asked you all to weigh in on your thoughts on whether the patriarchy is playing a role and what role it does play in modern relationships. So yeah, I actually thought I might use this podcast as an opportunity to revisit some of the data and the findings, which were super interesting, and then give you the final sort of update on how all the numbers came in. We got 63 responses in general. I'm happy with that. 54% were identified as female, 41% identified as male. So pretty much a binary community for the time being, which is not by design. We definitely want to be more inclusive than that. So we try to reflect that in our programming as well. But we did have 2 non-binary and 1 who preferred not to disclose their gender. 43% of the respondents were within the age range of 25 to 34. 46% were 35 to 44. So the vast majority of our audience is kind of somewhere between 25 and 45. Half in Berlin, a few extra in Germany, but not in Berlin. And then about 40% of those were in the United States. The first statement that I gave was, I typically notice the impact, for better or worse, that patriarchal structures are having on society. Most of these are on a scale of strongly agree to strongly disagree. This one was pretty much unanimous, not entirely, but pretty much unanimous. And again, I know that this is not a representative sample. By opting into being part of the ReSee and the Real Love community, we are already kind of self-selecting for a certain kind of person. But at the same time, other questions in the survey are not as unanimous. Over 90% of people either agreed or strongly agreed that for better or worse, patriarchal structures are having an impact on society that is noticeable. They can sort of see where patriarchy plays a role in everything. The next statement was society would be better off if we found ways to dismantle patriarchal structures. And again, almost 90%, so almost as high as the first one, almost as unanimous as the first one, said that society would be better off if we found ways to dismantle patriarchal structures. Then things start to get a little bit spicier and a little less unanimous. So I asked everyone if society would be better off with a matriarchal structure. 22% said they strongly agree that we would be better off with a matriarchal structure. 28% said they agreed. 38% said not sure or neutral, and then there were a few that disagreed. Now we start getting into the splits. Who knows how seriously people really meant their answers, but 50% agree that we'd be better off with a matriarchy than a patriarchy. The next statement or question was, how often do you personally notice a woman feeling uncomfortable or unsafe in her surroundings? Over 50% said that they notice a woman feeling uncomfortable or unsafe either almost daily or often. A larger percentage said every now and then. Nobody said that they never noticed that, and a couple people said that they rarely notice it. I kind of dug deeper into the data and I split that according to gender identity. Was curious if there would be any sort of difference between people who notice women being uncomfortable, who identify as female, and people who don't identify as female and whether they notice at a higher or lower clip. Dealing with small sample sizes here, but how the data ended up shaking out was of the 32 who identified as women, 12 said that they noticed women feeling uncomfortable or unsafe in their surroundings almost daily, and another 9 said often, as compared to of the 24 who identified as male, only 2 said that they notice women feeling uncomfortable or unsafe almost daily. Another 9 said that they see that happening often. So a little bit of a discrepancy and a lean towards women noticing it more often. The reality is that folks of all genders are noticing women being uncomfortable or unsafe. So again, just thinking about this in terms of how that could affect dating, how that could affect interpersonal relationships. If one gender is feeling genuinely unsafe more frequently than the others, that's going to have an impact. And it's something that, if you're not aware of it, maybe you should be, because you might not even realize that you're making someone feel uncomfortable or unsafe. The movie makes you think that this pretty young woman is so defenseless when she's walking home at night, but she's actually the predator and you're actually the one who's in trouble. So that's what makes it such a great movie. But at the same time, the true theme, the true sort of undercurrent of it is that women everywhere are made to feel kind of unsafe in a lot of patriarchal societies. But then to kind of get the other side of the story, I asked everyone how often they have been made to feel unsafe on a date or in a relationship. And of the group that identified as female, 4 said that they have been made to feel unsafe on a date or in a relationship many times. 13 said that they have been made to feel unsafe on a date or in a relationship a few times. 10 said rarely, 2 said never, and 3 said I'm not sure. Whereas for men, no men had said that they have been made to feel unsafe many times. 6 said that they had been made unsafe a few times. So it does happen. 1 said they're not sure, 8 said rarely, and 9 said never. The data kind of plays out that women are being made to feel unsafe in relationships at a higher clip than men. The point isn't for us to extrapolate and make this, sort of like what we're saying that this is a larger statement about all society. But if you're a member of our community, it's something for you to consider, because these respondents are people that that you may have interacted with. Then we got into a little bit of sort of the meat and potatoes of the survey, which is about gender dynamics in modern dating. We've done some events like this in the past. For those of you who have been following us for a while, last winter we showed Force Majeure, a film by Ruben Östlund, which is all about sort of gender norms and masculinity and how that plays a role in relationships, even in marriages and even in sort of relationships that have lasted the test of time for a while. So I asked everyone, for the most part, do they see themselves as adhering to normative masculine or feminine gender roles? AKA being like a man's man, a real woman, or like primarily like into guy stuff or into girl stuff or whatever. It's an intentionally open question for everyone to decide how they feel about it themselves. The results were pretty divided. Only 8% said they strongly agreed that they really adhered to normative masculine and feminine gender roles. Another 29%, so about 40% said they generally see themselves as adhering to masculine or feminine gender roles. 22% said they're not sure or neutral. And interestingly enough, 38% disagreed, and an additional 3%, so call it 40%, disagreed that they see themselves as adhering to normative masculine or feminine gender roles. But on the next question, we asked them to agree if their taste in romantic partner mostly aligns to gender norms. 62% say that their taste in romantic partner does mostly align with gender norms. So I found it interesting that like 40% of people are saying like, my personal traits don't align to gender norms, but my interests in my romantic partner does align to gender norms. 22% said that they are not sure or neutral. 15-ish% said that they disagreed or strongly disagreed that their tastes in romantic partners does not align mostly to gender norms. Why would it be that people who think that they personally don't sort of subscribe to gender normativity are interested in partners that do? Like, if you aren't a man's man, do you want this sort of like traditional sort of quiet and soft woman. Like how can it be that you're interested in something that you're not the inverse of? So I don't know. That's some food for thought, but I found those two questions to be interesting when put together. Would dating and relationships improve if we found ways to dismantle patriarchal relationships? 39.7% strongly agreed that relationships would improve if we could dismantle some elements of the patriarchy. Another 41% agreed. So combine the two, and you're basically at 80% agreeing that the patriarchy is preventing relationships from being better, and that if we got rid of the patriarchy, that we would have better dating and relationship structures. So a few people disagreed. We'll get into some of the individual responses later because there were some very interesting ones. I then asked a couple of questions about dating apps, social media, and film and television. Dating apps and social media reinforce harmful stereotypes, both gender-related and non-gender-related. 29% strongly agree that dating apps and social media reinforce harmful stereotypes. Another 35%, so between the two of them, 29 plus 35, like 64%, almost 2/3, either agreed or strongly agreed that dating apps and social media reinforce harmful stereotypes. But then I asked whether film and television reinforces harmful stereotypes, gender-related and otherwise, and 82% said that they agreed that it did. So if you wanted to extrapolate from there, it's like, okay, people actually think film and television is worse for sort of enforcing these stereotypes that are harmful than social media. Like, there's your answer for why some people prefer, TikTok and short form content over movies, if they feel like movies are actually more, conservative and more harmful and more stereotypical than what they're seeing online. So I think that's largely individual depending on your own echo chamber. They're not wrong. There's a lot of movies out there that are very, very gender normative. There's queer cinema and there's feminist cinema, but they end up occupying these niches as opposed to not all, but a vast majority of the sort of big blockbusters. If that's how you look at movies, I wouldn't blame you for not wanting to watch as many movies, but there are a lot of movies out there that are bucking that trend now. And I do feel like, me personally, I think Hollywood's doing a little bit better. But yeah, you let me know what you think. Patriarchal structures make it more difficult for queer and gender diverse people to find success in relationships. 27% strongly agreed, 41% agreed, so 68% between those two agreed. Almost 30% said they're not sure or neutral. I would have probably put not sure. I understand why there was a higher percentage of not sure here, but I think it's also interesting that even a largely straight, binary, heteronormative kind of sample size here agrees that patriarchy is having a negative impact on gender diverse relationships as well. There was one question on the survey that I actually think was the $1 million question, was the question that I kind of knew when I was creating the survey. This would be the one that was the most divided. And this is kind of the point of the entire evening that we put together. Do men know what it takes to be a good ally to women, make women feel safe? Do they know how to support women's rights and they are just not choosing to? Only one strongly agreed that most men know how to be a good ally to women. Only one out of 63. 12, so approximately 20% agreed. So if you put the two together, you're roughly at 20%. Another 29% said that they are not sure or neutral. And over 50% either disagreed or strongly disagreed that most men know how to be good allies to women. And I think I'm in that category as well. I do actually think that I know what it takes to be a good ally to women, but I don't think I'm exactly the norm. And I think it can actually be really hard. Like if you flipped it and you said, how are you a good ally to Black people? Well, I have my personal answer, but I can't exactly speak for the entire Black delegation. Like if you ask 10 Black people how to be a good ally, you're probably going to get 10 different answers. Yeah, I'm always joking that on social media, you see like people like, it's easy to be a good ally. All you have to do is stand up and sit down and speak up and shut the fuck up. And I'm like, damn, it's really hard to know when to do one of those things and when to do literally the exact opposite thing. Maybe we have to kind of try to have more of an open dialogue about what it means to be a good ally. Generally can't take it for granted that someone knows what they're supposed to do or what you're feeling without you telling them. That's kind of part of my life philosophy, at least. But if this many people are saying, and remember, most of the survey respondents were women. So even women are saying that men don't know how to be good allies. And that probably has a lot to do with we were raised in this patriarchal society. We're not taught how to be allies to women when we're in school or from a young age. If you're not raised with sort of forward-thinking, progressive parents, you're not going to get that instilled in you. That is the question that it really stuck with me the most out of all of them. And then from there, the last few questions on the survey were kind of more open-ended. In your own life, where do you notice the patriarchy making women feel uncomfortable, unsafe, or unheard? It was a lot of what you would expect. People saying that they notice women feeling uncomfortable or unsafe or unheard in the workplace, within their own families. I think a lot of people just said literally everywhere. One person said that it can lead to people not viewing the other gender as a potential for friendship and only reduce them to someone that they can or would like to date. And I actually thought that was one of the best responses to this question. When you are really tunnel vision focused on meeting someone or finding a romantic partner, and then someone comes along and they're actually a better fit for potentially a friendship, if you're solely sort of intent on finding a romantic partner, you miss an opportunity to gain a friend, and you never know. You might end up meeting your partner through that friend as opposed to that person being your romantic partner. Someone called out mansplaining, which is totally fair. I think that's an obvious way that the patriarchy kind of manifests itself, no pun intended. And someone said, I see systems that are clearly designed by men and for men, which reward patriarchal behavior, AKA the biggest, loudest, and strongest being rewarded over the most informed or the most talented. And there is misogyny laced in all of it. I've actually had the pleasure of having quite a few female managers in my career, which is pretty cool and pretty rare in the tech industry. But yes, short answer, yes. You see a lot of mediocre white men getting promotions over more talented or more deserving or more experienced candidates. There's been a lot of studies about how men and women with equal, similar backgrounds end up having a huge gap in pay, the gender pay gap. And so, yeah, I would say that the gender pay gap is also kind of a very obvious manifestation of the patriarchy. And in the government trying to own women's bodies. It's really easy for society to continue to reinforce patriarchal structures when it's coming from the government and coming from the top down. Register to vote and vote. What's one actionable thing that you think single men could do to improve modern dating? And I just wanted to give like 3 shout outs to 3 answers that I thought were truly special. Make sure to ask for the counter opinion every time, every in all caps. As in general, invite discussion around whether anyone who you're talking to agrees with you or not, because it would give a platform and an opportunity for those who feel like they are not being given a voice to speak up. And that would do wonders for, women who feel like there's a lot of pressure to be seen and not heard, or that their male counterparts just kind of in general just tend to dominate conversations and all of that, which is something you hear from a lot of women. But it would do wonders for people who are shy, for people who don't necessarily have the confidence to speak up, or for people who are worried about their opinion being different and how that's going to have blowback if they do speak up. Someone wrote, be a little gay, which if that works. One thing that single men could do to improve modern dating, read books written by women about women. They have a lack of knowledge about women's works because they don't have interest in the women around them. Reading helps you understand others' worlds. A man who does view himself as an ally can take as a challenge. I personally have been trying to challenge myself for years to watch more films directed by women and starring women. Over 90% of big budget Hollywood films have male directors and have like male protagonists. I don't really read books as often as I should, unfortunately, but I would say that this applies to watching films as well. You can at least do that, then you'll be opening yourself up to other perspectives and hopefully learning a thing or two about someone else's experience, because that's the magic of movies. And the last answer, and I think it was actually my favorite answer of the entire stack of great answers, to drink less alcohol and try to build relationships that don't revolve around drinking. Men statistically tend to drink more. I think the dichotomy is even larger with Gen Z. I think it's like twice as many, in some studies, twice as many young men report drinking regularly as young women. Gen Z drinks a lot less than millennials in general, but I think generally across the board, men drink more and definitely drink more heavily, which of course can lead to a lot of messy scenarios and women feeling unsafe. Start by trying to disconnect your social life from alcohol and find yourself some spaces that do not revolve around alcohol. And I bet when you do that, you'll find yourself kind of interacting with more women. The last question on the survey was, what's one actionable thing that you think single women could do to improve dating? So there was a lot of like, this is really on men to fix this problem. I genuinely do believe that as well. I think in general, it's the oppressive classes' responsibility to unravel these systems of supremacy and oppression that we have. I think that white people have a specific role in bringing an anti-racist culture to the mainstream. I think men have a role in dismantling the patriarchy. I think citizens have a role in standing up for immigrants and refugees' rights. So it really does, it's just a matter of power dynamics. And yeah, if you're part of the privileged class, you have a real responsibility to try to dismantle those power structures. And yet there are things that women could do to improve dating as well. Just be choosier, don't lower your standards for men. I think we're going to have to do a completely other episode on the concept of standards, but there were some really cool answers as well. Try to set up our friends more often. Let's stop being afraid to offer our support to our single friends. If you feel like you're surrounded by dateable women, then introduce those dateable women to men. I don't think there's much harm in sort of saying like, hey, I think you're great and I want to help you find someone. And I know that's kind of awkward, but would you be open to me setting you up with so-and-so? I've got someone that you might be interested in. Like maybe it's a little awkward, but maybe that awkwardness would actually be like kind of welcomed and would kind of challenge you to get out of your comfort zone a little bit. Someone also said, be a little gay to this answer. So I think someone just wants everyone to be a little gay and I don't blame them. So shout out to the be a little gay person. Perhaps being more comfortable making the first move, ? But that's a product of patriarchy, of course. That is true. I think a lot of women who would otherwise make the first move are worried that men would be intimidated or embarrassed or emasculated if women made the first move on them. So yeah, I'll stop there, but that's kind of the gist of the activity that we did at the last Dystopian Dating. And I would love to hear from you all and to know if you think that it would be interesting to continue this sort of survey meets dialogue meets in real life events, and the combination of those three would help to kind of bridge the gap between our online and in-person communities. However, the point of this podcast is to give you some movie recommendations. I know that's what you came here for, so I won't hold out any longer. And I'm going to start with a movie that was recommended to me by a friend who works in the industry on Netflix. It's just recently came out. It's called A House of Dynamite, featuring a pretty star-studded cast led by Rebecca Ferguson, but it kind of takes place from a bunch of different perspectives and it's these interweaving storylines about a missile crisis affecting the United States. And I won't say a lot about the plot because I don't really like to discuss spoilers. I'm very sensitive to them. But when I watched this movie, it was just like, damn, I really wish I had more people to discuss movies with. I don't know about you guys. I know that's ironic because like I have a movie startup and have multiple, events per month where I could talk to people about movies. But when I'm at those events, I'm kind of in work mode and I don't really talk about movies as much outside of the one that I'm hosting. And I also don't go to movies as often as I used to, which is the tragedy of building up a movies company. It's like, damn, I have no time left to actually go to the movies as a fan. But this was like the first time that someone had recommended me a movie to watch in, I think, months. It was just really refreshing to be given a challenge to watch a movie and then to have someone to text after I had time to think about that movie and be like, dude, what the hell was that movie? Either in a good way or a bad way. So shout out to Joe for giving me the recommendation of watching House of Dynamite. And if you've seen this movie, let me know what you thought of it. Send me a DM so we won't talk about it. So the second movie that I'm going to recommend, although a lot of you, I imagine, have seen it because the hype train has been in full motion, is One Battle After Another, the new Paul Thomas Anderson film. One of the best Paul Thomas Anderson movies, in my opinion. I have never been like the biggest PTA fan, but I do respect the hell out of his craft, and I do think he's a true auteur. And I'm always down to see his movies, whether I end up liking them or not. And it's crazy that, Leonardo DiCaprio, being such a A-lister and a showstopper, kind of gets outshined by like Chase Infinity and Benicio del Toro. And so it's a great movie. It's a great balance of characters. I think Paul Thomas Anderson writes incredible characters. I think that's one of his biggest strengths. And I was really glad that I got to see this in cinemas because it's the kind of movie that does not typically get the big budget release like this one has. And also, it's 2 hours and 40 minutes long, but it does not feel very long. And I think that's the best compliment that you can give a movie that is 2 hours and 40 minutes long. And the last movie that I'm going to recommend to you all, for no reason other than I think that this is my favorite underrated Christmas movie, and we are in Christmas season officially now. I am not a huge holiday movie person. I kind of feel like it's a little hokey to watch Christmas movies around Christmas and spooky movies only around Halloween. I try to, I can watch a Christmas movie in July, but for a lot of people, they like getting into the swing of it with, the same old Hollywood movies, and they watch their classics every year. And there are some fantastic Christmas classics that it does feel right to watch every year. Like I think of like It's a Wonderful Life as an example. It's just a movie that like you can't help but watch every year at some point. My personal favorite, Nightmare Before Christmas, although I always ask, is it a Christmas movie or is it a Halloween movie? I actually feel like it's a better Christmas movie, but that's just me personally. It's my second favorite Christmas movie of all time in total, and that is Tokyo Godfathers by Satoshi Kon, the late Satoshi Kon, rest in peace. It is a story of three homeless vagabonds who discover a abandoned baby on Christmas Eve, and they go on a Christmas Eve adventure to return this baby to its parents, and it ends up being a wild, surrealist adventure. It's actually based on a John Ford Western from the 1940s starring John Wayne called Three Godfathers. But this is an anime revival and a reimagination, and there's a lot more surrealist, and it's just like a really cool and heartwarming, that definitely a Christmas spirit kind of movie from a culture that you don't normally associate with Christmas in Japan, and a format that you don't associate with Christmas, which is anime. So if you're looking for a new Christmas classic to add to your collection, check out Tokyo Godfathers by Satoshi Kon, and I recommend that for no other reason other than it is a movie that I'm constantly stepping up on the soapbox to recommend to people. There you have it. Those are my 3 recommendations for the week. Let me know what you think about them. Nothing super mind-blowing about any of those recommendations, I would say, but let me know what you think about the recommendations, and please recommend me a film if you're watching this podcast all the way to the end, because I like recommendations too. Thanks for tuning in for the first solo edition of the ReSee Movies What to Watch podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't so boring without a guest. And since this is the first time, I really, really, really would like to get feedback from you all and to hear what you think about it. So don't be a stranger. See you around, hopefully at the movies. Take care.